I'm Sally Coulthard. I'm an author and smallholder, and have spent 2 decades building the good life with my family and animals in the Yorkshire countryside. Gardeners often say that March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. But living in North Yorkshire, I found that true of the entire spring season. It starts off wet and bitterly cold, but by the end of the season, we can be bathed in warm sunshine. This unpredictability can be tricky, so I spend a good chunk of spring planning, especially what I'm going to plant in the veg garden. Each year is different, thinking and drawing out my ideas, something I wanted to share with you today.
Now, the first thing you've got to think about when you're planning your veg garden is what you'd actually like to grow. It's really helpful to think about 3 things when you're choosing your vegetables. The first is, what do you actually like to eat? I grow all the things that my family and I enjoy for dinner. So we have things like aubergines, tomatoes, lettuces, things that we're going to eat on a daily basis. The second category I think about is what's actually really expensive in supermarkets or greengrocers at the moment. So I tend to grow slightly kind of unusual varieties or herbs and vegetables that are quite tricky to get. So I tend not to grow brassicas very much. I don't tend to grow many potatoes because they tend to be pretty good value anyway. And then the third thing you've got to think about is actually how much can you eat and how much can you store? There's a temptation when you're first vegetable gardening to just grow as much as you possibly can. And then come late summer, you'll have a massive glut of vegetables that you actually can't do anything with. So the really good idea is to think about, how am I going to eat this? And if I can't eat it, how am I going to store it? I mean, there are lots of ways you can store things. You can pickle them, you can dry them, you can freeze them, but just bear that in mind. If you're new to vegetable gardening, it can be a bit worrying about what to choose to grow, but actually be reassured, most things just want to grow and you can't really go wrong. However, there are a few plants that when I started vegetable gardening, I started with, and they were really, really easy. So the first thing is lettuce. You just sow it outside and it should grow like stink, and you'll be eating fresh salads all summer long. Another good vegetable, peas. They are dead easy to look after and really hardy, especially in this part of the world where it can be quite cold even in spring. Rainbow chard is another one, and that will just keep coming and coming and coming, and you'll have gorgeous leafy greens right through until October. And then finally, 2 absolute stalwarts of the garden, and that's beetroot and carrot. And they are absolutely delicious, and you'll still be pulling those up in autumn. So now you've decided what you're going to grow, the next stage of planning a garden is to grab a pencil and a measuring tape and let's start plotting. I found it really useful over the years when I've been planning my veg garden to create a good scale map so I can think about what goes where, but also if I'm adding extra structures to the garden, like raised beds or greenhouses or fruit cages, I can work out if they're actually going to fit in the space. The first thing I've done is I've been outside and I've just created a really rough sketch of the outside space. It doesn't have to be perfect, it was really quick, but the key thing was to get some good measurements, because that's what I'm going to use to create a scale drawing. Once I've come back in, I've got some good measurements, which I'll use my surveyor's tape for. You can use an ordinary tape measure and start plotting out. I don't have a massive sheet of paper here, so I've just stuck A4 sheets together, and I find that's absolutely fine. And actually it has the added bonus if I can fold it away at the end of the day, I'm not worried about it. When you're drawing your plan, I found the absolute easiest scale to work with is 1 to 100. Now, scale rulers, I think, can look sometimes a bit intimidating, and if you're not brilliant at maths like me, one of the easiest scales that you can choose to work with is 1 to 100. And what that means practically is that 1 centimetre on your plan is 1 metre in real life, and that's a doddle. That means if you're drawing a raised bed that's 2 metres by 2 metres, on your plan it'll be 2 centimetres by 2 centimetres. I do a complete plan of the garden. I've included lots of different features that are in the garden. Things like the hedges, the fences, the gates. And then I've plotted the things that are really important in my veg garden for me, which are the things like the raised beds, where the position of the garden greenhouse is, the flower beds, the fruit cages. It just really helps me work out where I've got space. When I've got that all nicely plotted out, you can then start thinking about adding layers to it. And this is great because these can change year on year. And so I use tracing paper. I lay it over my design and I start to think about what plants are going to grow where. Now I've already got some sweet peas planned for the edge of the herb garden, but I think I'm going to try, I've got some space here to incorporate a climbing rose, so I shall make that note on my plan. There we go, climbing rose. And I'll train that to grow up through the hedge as well, which will look really beautiful. And then if you want to go one stage further or ever add new structural elements to your garden, this is a really fun bit. I started to create little scale models. So here's a weeny greenhouse. And the idea of this is it's not just a nice way to pass a few hours on a wet Sunday afternoon. Here's my fruit cages. But actually, when you're adding new structural elements to the garden, you need to actually be able to navigate your way around them. They've got to be practical. They've got to be scaled to the size of your garden. You don't want something too big, too small.
Now, gardeners often talk about right plant, right place. But what does that even mean? I think what it means is thinking about the practicalities of where certain plants thrive best in the garden and how you can get the most out of where you place your vegetables in a plot. For me, one of the biggest deals is practicality and how close the things that I need from the garden are going to be to the door. So I tend to plant the vegetables that I eat the most often closest to the door. That's things like herbs, lettuces, spring onions, things that I'm going to be using in my cooking every day. The second thing I think you need to think about is orientation, and what that really means is just where the sun shines. Plants like this, which is an artichoke, need bags of sunshine, and so I like to place plants like these full sun, and that means facing south. In fact, most vegetables really like quite a lot of sunshine. So when you're planning out your vegetable garden, you just need to think about where the shade is and where the sunshine is. There's a third aspect to your vegetable garden called companion planting. And essentially what that means is which plants get along together and which even can help each other. A great example of this is leeks. Now, any member of the allium family are brilliant at deterring a certain pest called carrot fly. And so I'll plant my carrot seedlings next to the alliums, but you could also plant them next to onions, spring onions, basically any member of the allium family. Another really nice form of companion planting is planting flowers that attract beneficial pollinators. So here I've planted sweet peas, and these will hopefully grow up this arch that I've put here and will attract bees, butterflies and other beneficial pollinators that are going to pollinate my fruit and vegetable and make sure that we have a fantastic harvest. I absolutely love living in the countryside, but one of the only downsides is that it's a real battle sometimes when you're growing soft fruit to keep them away from the birds. And so a few years ago, we decided to put up 3 fruit cages and try and grow different varieties of soft fruit in them. In the first one,
we're trying autumn fruiting raspberries. Now, we've not had much luck with raspberries actually over the years, so fingers crossed this is a new variety that we're trying, and hopefully we'll have something by the end of the summer. In here we have black currants, which are absolutely brilliant and one of the easiest soft fruits to grow, and they just keep coming and coming, and they're brilliant in desserts and we use them all the time. We also have rhubarb in here. It doesn't need to be in a fruit cage, but actually it's great because it's a bit of a spreader and there's a bit of space there. Not everything you grow in a veg garden will be a success, and that is absolutely fine and absolutely normal. We've tried year upon year to grow blueberries. It should be fine in this climate, but they just won't take. And this year, in the back fruit cage there, we're actually trying a new type of cultivated blackberry and a chokeberry, which I've never eaten before, and so that's going to be a real adventure. And that's sitting alongside a pink gooseberry, which is absolutely perfect and keeps on coming year after year. Now, I've been growing vegetables for about 20 years now, and I really think that raised beds are the absolutely best way to do it. Not only are they really neat and ordered, which makes your life easier when you're gardening, but they're also brilliant at a height that stops your back from hurting, and also it seems to really deter pests like rabbits from eating all your delicious vegetables. This is a really sunny quarter of the garden, and so I'm planting everything this year that absolutely loves the sunshine. So from everything from French beans to broad beans, I've got my potatoes in here. This is going to be petit pois, and then at the back, lettuce. And then behind me, I'm just trying new ways of growing things up plant supports. So this year, I'm going to try climbing courgettes and different types of squashes. So hopefully, by about June, July, this should absolutely be bursting with life. I really rely on plant supports when I'm growing in my veg garden. Everything from climbing French beans to peas, even to broad beans needs some kind of support, but also it gives a bit of protection from things like chickens or other animals that are trying to eat my vegetables. I love thinking of different ways of bending the twigs and creating lovely lines in the garden. This is going to support the peas, but it doesn't mean I haven't added a few decorative flourishes.